My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beef Pork Ribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, comics, graphic novels, TV, cartoons, animation, nerds are geeks, entertainment culture. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power. Nerds and geeks, come gather around the scene. Come and join us in the Bat Jar. Come and tune into Average Joe and his team. Lots of room here in the Bat Jar. When the newest nerdy news drops, these podcast pals put it under the scope. DC, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, cinematic, multiverse. It's mega Christmas, strangest franchise. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope.
And when there's many geek and nerd culture things, we take a good hard look at them and what they mean for the world today.
Ah yes, the age-old question. Here's a question.
What does the MCU mean today, if anything?
Well, I was going to ask if you've watched either the Game of Thrones prequel or the Lord of the Rings prequel that have just come out.
No. I don't. I might end up checking out the Lord of the Rings one. Maybe. And if I don't like the first episode, I'll stop. There's a good chance at some point I will watch House Targaryen, or at least partially.
House
but
of the
mostly
Dragon.
Just House of the Dragon, yeah. But mostly just because Mjolnir really likes Matt Smith, even though he looks terrible with long white hair. Like,
who
it's
does
funny
look good with long white hair?
Emilia Clarke, yeah. But other than that, yeah, not much.
Okay, I saw someone comment today on the internet that the fact that there's a Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones thing happening at the same time means that they're going to be like put in comparison with each other a lot.
Oh, maybe. I'm not sure that's entirely. I don't know. It's a weird thing because people were doing like trying to compare Game of Thrones to Lord of the Rings, for a long time, and they're so completely different. It's almost like they are basically a different genre. Like, they're both fantasy, but they're really, really different. Like, I don't know. It's barely worth.
I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't think I'll end up watching, unless we end up covering either of them for the podcast. I don't foresee myself watching either of them.
Yeah, and well, even there, we could talk about them without watching them, like if we cover them in the podcast. Because, I don't know. There's just so many differences between them that it seems like a disservice to compare them to one another. Like a disservice to both. They both are trying to accomplish very different things, and one of them is done, the other one may or may not ever finish properly.
And you're talking about Lord of the Rings, right? That's the one that'll never end.
No.
I did get into the theaters to see the more fun stuff version of Spider-Man No Way Home.
Oh, and was there more fun stuff, or
there was some more fun stuff?
Was there enough more fun stuff to make it worth going to the theaters again, or I know you especially probably would feel that it's worth going to the theaters for that movie generally, but was the more fun stuff enough for somebody who doesn't already like the movie to want to go?
I would say I'm glad I went and saw it on National Cinema Day when tickets were only $3.
Oh.
Because
okay.
The reality is that most of the extra
review.
footage is stuff towards the beginning of the movie.
Okay.
When you get to the part where all three Spider-Men are there, there's really only about a minute of extra stuff.
That's unfortunate.
Which is, and it's good stuff. Like, again, it just further demonstrates the chemistry the three of them had together. But most of the new footage is towards the beginning of the film, like everyone's reacting to Peter Parker being Spider-Man kind of part of the film.
Okay. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Well, that is unfortunate, especially because they did. I don't know. I feel like it was very highly marketed as there's more of the Spider-Man together, and
Yeah, and again, there's
like I'm
there's
even
like,
if it happened, if it's not a lot, then it's was it worth it?
well, again, like I don't know what their thought process was, because when the Blu-ray was first announced, there was 20 minutes of additional stuff that was going to be included as deleted scenes. So the
Right.
fact that the more fun stuff edition of the film was only 11 minutes would suggest that there's actually there's still 9
More
minutes
fun
of
stuff.
content somewhere.
It's okay. We'll get the who was the director?
John Watts.
We'll get the John Watts cut.
No, he's been pretty vocal about being content with the theatrical cut of the film. So
Yeah, as a director should be, like, when you get down to it.
well, I mean, have you heard of Alan Smithy before?
No.
So
Wait, is he
Alan
the director of
Smithy-
Apocalypse Now?
Alan Smithy is I'm sure it was a real person's name at some point.
Oh,
Alan
yeah,
Smithy,
yeah.
He's
Okay.
it's like a thing that was created by the Directors Guild of America that basically what it allows is when a director feels like the movie's been taken away from him,
Yeah.
or that I shouldn't say him, but them,
They
can
get to
basically
put
say,
that
I don't
name
want my
on.
name listed on this
Yeah.
film, and Alan Smithy is credited as the director of it.
Yeah, Alan Smithy has the worst record on RottenTomato.com.
Of course, because naturally all these bad movies are directed by him.
Yeah.
I also went and saw Dragon Ball Superhero again with our friend One Shot.
That was
He sends his love to you.
that's good.
You beef
You'll
pork
have to
ribs,
remind me
not
after the
necessarily
podcast
our
who
entire
that is.
listener base.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
What made this the bee's knees
Uh-huh.
is that we went and saw it in like the 4DX screening. And I had never been to a movie in 4DX before, but basically there's like fans, like wind fans along the ceiling that blow when there's like any kind of air.
Oh, which in a Dragon Ball Z movie would seem necessary several times.
Yeah, there's smoke machines at the front of the theater that kind of like shoot out smoke whenever there's like an explosion or like dust settling.
Okay.
And your seat, like the D-Box one you can go to, your seat rumbles a bit and kind of moves up and down a bit. But this was literally like a roller coaster. It's like it was moving all over and
Oh,
up
nice.
and down.
I've been in a theater like that only once. It was a science museum where they had like a minecart simulation. I don't know if you've ever been to
wild.
Science North.
It was just I was laughing. I was like, this is a grand old time. And because it's a Dragon Ball movie where there's these action scenes where people are getting thrown through mountains and stuff and the camera's moving super fast. Like I thought I was going to fall out of my seat a couple times.
I like it.
That is the way to see that movie. One Shot had to go to the bathroom at one point because we were getting jostled so much.
Wow. Nice. I like it.
I'd also like to just to acknowledge, we're putting out this episode a day late. It's Labor Day weekend, so in hindsight, we probably should just post episodes late when it's a long weekend because we're generally away. So,
But in case anybody is wondering.
yeah. But it's providential because the day that we're recording on, which is September 5th, apparently this is the 30th anniversary of when Batman, the animated series, aired its first episode back in 1992.
Oh. Well, look at that. We didn't do it on purpose, but we could have.
Yes. So, I mean, this episode will go out on Tuesday, September 6th, so the anniversary will have passed you in the real world, but in our little pocket of time we exist in, it's the anniversary of that show, which, as I've said before, is basically how I got introduced to superheroes into Batman and
How you became a nerd.
how I became Average Joe. I probably wouldn't be doing this podcast now if I mean, who knows? There might have been something else that came along, but
Yeah. But I feel like it was very much, in your circles at least, your expertise in superhero that most people, like, that got people talking to you, that got you wanting to put out more information out in the world about nerd and geek culture, right?
yeah. When would you have first seen BT? Some call it BTAS, some call it BTAS.
Oh, man. Um,
And was it in French?
it was not in French. Who? I think the first episode I ever saw, man, I think it was at my cousin's place at some point in the early 2000s. I can't be more specific than that. At some point, I got the first season on DVD. Actually, that was when I was working at a camp a few years ago. So, like, I've only, like, fairly recently watched the bulk of it. Like, I think in 2017 is when I finally actually watched most of it. But I had seen a few episodes here and there before that.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's but it was something that I was always aware of, and I think something that kind of like stuck with me quite a bit was like because as far as I can remember, like that Joker was the Joker, and that I remember knowing like the opening theme a long time before I watched it. So, yeah, I'd seen a few episodes here and there, but it is only fairly recently that I really got into watching it.
And I'm guessing you never saw any of the spin-off shows like Justice League or Batman Beyond or Static Shock.
I saw Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. I own that movie because it's great. I watched some Justice League, but that was also like after high school. Like I never watched it when I was a kid.
Oh man, that's
I didn't
cool.
watch a lot of shows when I was a kid. We've been through
No, I'm
this.
not saying because it's bad. It's like it's great to hear that we have different experiences of
Yeah.
things,
Oh, for sure.
But anyway, yes, happy anniversary to Batman the Animated Series. Thank you for introducing me to Batman and superheroes, and I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for you.
A truer word was never spoken in a weird, wimpy voice.
All right, so enough about Batman and DC because we are here today to talk about Marvel.
Oh yeah, we started completely on the wrong company.
So we're here to kind of. This isn't like a post-mortem on the Marvel Disney Plus shows.
Ah!
Because they're not all like, it's not like they're finished, right?
Yeah, they're not dead. They're not finished. Most of them are getting a second season.
And it's not like a midterm evaluation either, because there's no real end in sight to.
There is no end to what Disney will do.
Well, this Thursday is Disney Plus Day, and then this weekend coming up is the D23, like Disney's Comic-Con. So they'll be announcing probably more Disney Plus shows after this.
Yeah, well, we'll see what we get.
So just to provide some context, we are talking about television shows produced by Marvel Studios for Disney Plus. So we're not talking about any Marvel TV show made for streaming or any Marvel TV show. So we're leaving out all the Netflix shows. We're leaving out Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter and Inhumans. We're specifically talking about the shows that have been made explicitly to be connected to the MCU that was introduced to us just because of the movies.
And where did we finally land on the animated show being part of it?
For the sake of the conversation, we'll include What If. Why not?
All right.
The first question I want to ask you, do you think Disney would have, or sorry, not Disney, Marvel. Do you think Marvel would have started making shows for television if it weren't for Disney Plus?
I do think it would have eventually happened, but I don't know if it would have been in this fashion, right? Because I do think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe eventually going into TV shows was the next logical thing to happen. Like, it made sense. It's hard to tell. Like, it might have found a life on Netflix. It might have been like, it would have. I think it would have still existed, but it would be a very different beast than what we've been getting, right? And possibly also, I think it would have. I think it would have gone a lot slower, and I think that would have been a good thing in hindsight. But I do think it was going to happen eventually, right? Because like there were people who clearly wanted to push forward. There were stories to be told, and the way I don't know the way that the movies were going, and I think also just the kind of throwing random cameos was ripening the ground for something like that, especially like with streaming services. Now, if instead of Disney Plus we say like without streaming services, no, I don't think it would have happened.
You're right.
But
So you're saying they wouldn't have made a show for like ABC or NBC kind of
I
thing.
don't think so. No, I think in that kind of climate, it wouldn't have happened.
Because I know we said we weren't going to talk about those other shows, but if you think of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Daredevil, before the MCU really leaned into the multiverse concept, they created those different shows to kind of connect to the MCU. Like they had, Coulson was there in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show, and they made references to Avengers characters in Daredevil.
Yeah. But that again was on a streaming platform, right? Like it was being produced for that purpose.
Yeah. So we have two different kinds of Marvel TV shows. We have ones that danced around connections to the movies, and then now we have the ones that are
fully canon,
entirely canon. So I guess that's another question. From the maybe you haven't seen. Have you seen many of the other shows I mentioned, like Punisher or Luke Cage? Or
oh my gosh, I have seen the first season and a half of Daredevil, and I think I've seen an episode of Punisher.
So you don't exactly have the widest experience with non-Disney Plus Marvel TV shows.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I've seen most of the Netflix stuff. I think what held those shows back is the fact that they had to do 13-episode seasons.
Yeah.
That was kind of like the standard for Netflix dramas when those shows were being made. So, and they were like hour-long episodes. So there was just so much content, and the stories were padded, and they could have been a lot shorter.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Daredevil's the only one I've seen, and it was it was good TV, and it was well made. But I can't speak for the rest of them. But it also, I don't know, often is the case that like new things tend to just not work as well if it's the first time it's being done. Because I mean, I feel like, yeah, the first time you do, especially the first time you do a TV the first superhero TV show, as far as I could tell, was the old Batman one. And that was, as much as people love it, it's kind of a disaster. Or actually, was the Fantastic Four older?
Well, the Superman show from the 50s was the
first. Yeah, that's true. Which was also, like, people look at it now and, like, what were they thinking? And I feel like, the CW shows have a little bit of that in their history. It was like, yeah, they were trying something, but whether that worked or not is debatable.
An interesting statistic I discovered, if you were to add up the runtime of Phase 4, so like every movie that's been released since Black Widow,
yeah,
and you add up the screen time of all these Disney Plus shows, the like total runtime for Phase 4 is longer than phases 1, 2, and 3 of the MCU combined.
Yeah, that's not surprising. They've been pumping out so much content, and not necessarily short things either, right? Like you've had some substantial, like not necessarily very long, but very substantial things coming out, and like yeah, when you add it all up, it becomes kind of crazy.
Yeah, each of these Disney Plus shows has had about 6 hours of content, and in some cases, it's 9 episodes that are like 30 to 40 minutes, and in other cases, it's been like 6 episodes that are closer to an hour.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like this. You've talked about having Marvel fatigue for a while now, and I'm wondering, like, is this too much? Like, to think that there's more content in just Phase 4 than the rest, like the last 10 years of the MCU. That seems like you're going way like too fast.
Yeah, and the other thing is that like a lot of it, they're still trying to keep a broad broad audience too. Like they're trying to keep it accessible to most people. Like they are starting to add more and more things, but they're also kind of explaining it, and in some cases over explaining it. So like yes, there's more Easter eggs, but there's also a lot more just like, yeah, we didn't need to know this, or this kind of is just, I don't know, lingering, if that makes sense. Like it goes on a little too long, and you're like, well, did we need to actually introduce all of this in this show right now? And the answer quite often is no. And you know, we're not the only people who do this, and it's no coincidence that there's been this kind of ongoing thing since they started making their show. It's like, should this have been a movie? You know, and I think just the fact that the should this have been a movie conversation exists is kind of proof that they've gone too far. They've done too many things.
Yeah, and I wonder if they're like afraid of making movies for Disney Plus, because it then will create like a class system between like the movies that are made for Disney Plus and the movies that are made for theaters.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably something of that, but like, don't get me wrong, I don't think that TV shows are a bad medium for what they're trying to do. Like, I do think that it works. It's just that they need to kind of moderate what they've been doing. And that's where I'm not seeing that happening, is they just seem to be churning at an incredible speed, like in a way that they wouldn't do if it was a movie, because movies tend to be a bigger investment, right? And are more scrutinized on investment, I think, than TV shows are, especially again streaming TV shows where you can't always prove what the profit was. You know?
Yeah.
Because
I would make the claim,
you know, you can look at the numbers increase in Disney Plus, but that's still not necessarily straight up profits either.
Yeah. I would make the claim that the only shows in this list that should have been a show instead of a movie are WandaVision, What If, and She-Hulk.
I mean, She-Hulk's not done yet, so I'm going to reserve my judgment on that.
Sure, but okay, at this point, 3 episodes of She-Hulk have come out.
Oh,
but at least each episode is kind of like talking about different cases. Like the setup that they've made for the show feels like a TV show and not just a movie, because it's leaning into like the lawyer show elements that is like a common thing for TV.
Yeah, no, I'll give it that.
What If
it
obviously is episodic because
right
it's every episode presents a different alternate universe. And
kind of, but What If also has that weird thing where it's kind of trying to have its cake and eat it too.
Well, okay, the different worlds that they visit only really come together in like the last 2 episodes.
Yeah, but they don't. But it was clearly a setup for that, right?
Sure, but again, like you couldn't have made What If a movie because it would have felt so vignette-y to have.
Oh, okay, yeah, you couldn't have made it a movie, but But you could have also released it as an anthology instead of a series.
Like on a streaming service, what's the difference between like an anthology and a series?
The fact that you have a through line, those last 2 episodes where they brought everything else together, you wouldn't need that if you were doing an anthology, right? Like, and I think the concept of What If works better that way, instead of trying to bring it together. Like, I understand why you would do it, but if it's an anthology, you don't need to do that. And then again, you, as Marvel, are not messing up what an alternate universe timeline, etc. is, because What If is part of that problem.
Okay, we'll put a pin on that for now. And then WandaVision,
I completely agree.
Yeah, it was set up to pay tribute to different eras of television, and you really couldn't. Again,
it would have been really weird if WandaVision was a movie.
Yeah,
given what WandaVision is.
Like with every other show, I can't remember really, like, I wouldn't be able to tell you, oh, this is that episode or this is that episode. It just I remember the whole story, and there's like kind of moments that happen in different episodes, you know?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
They've also chosen for these shows to do like the week by week release instead of kind of putting it out to binge all at once, which I prefer because it like simulates the experience of watching traditional television.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's, I don't know.
Yeah, the start and end points for the different episodes feels almost like this. Like, well, we have to like end the story at this specific spot so that we can be on to the next episode.
Yeah, and you can still binge it. Like, there's nothing stopping you from doing that, because it is still on a streaming platform, which is very conducive to binging, right? Like, it'll still autoplay. You'll still have it all at once. You don't have to wait for DVDs to do something like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think the thing that most people will say has been a positive of these shows is that characters who were either previously just basically like sidekicks in the movies have gotten the spotlight and chance to like be the star of the show themselves.
Have they though? Like, I know you could say that, but I can't think of that many very good examples of it. Like,
well, I mean, the first couple of shows that they made, like WandaVision, Wanda and Vision, were never really the central focus in any of the movies they were in.
I mean, no, but Loki definitely was, and like
Falcon and Winter Soldier, they were literally just different sidekicks for Captain America. Hawkeye? Don't tell me Hawkeye was ever the focus of anything.
They were trying really hard to make him the focus of half of Age of Ultron. That movie didn't work in any way, and that's part of what didn't work. Like, I understand what you mean by that, but it wasn't like background characters being built. It was more like secondary being primary, which I don't think is that impressive, personally.
You don't? Like, you don't think the idea that, like, they've never made would they have made a movie about these people, you know?
I mean, probably not, but that's, I don't know, that they are making the TV show now, so I don't know, there's no real point.
I think the element, I mean,
I don't know.
Again, like, maybe because they were secondary characters in the movies they were in, but none of these characters were ever really my favorites. I was not looking forward to more footage of Hawkeye or more of the Vision. But to their credit, the different shows featuring them kind of brought me into their world and what their daily life is like. And I was able to connect with them more.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. And yeah, it is something good. I still don't fully agree that that's necessarily what's been accomplished by all of them.
Like you mentioned Loki. Loki got a lot of focus in the movies. So giving him a show where he is the star, would you say it wasn't accomplished with him?
Yeah, but even WandaVision, like, you were still taking 2 very popular side characters. Like, I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier is the biggest proof of concept for that. And, you know, I didn't like Falcon and the Winter Soldier that much, so I don't know if that, but I know that's somewhere I'm in the minority, but like Scarlet Witch was really big, and there definitely would have been a Scarlet Witch movie or something with her being important. I mean, they could be setting her up to be the main villain of Phase 4. Not actually, but like that one is less impressive because Scarlet Witch is such an important character, especially, they're not going to do this, but if they wanted to bring in the mutants, that was the best way to do it. There are two famous comic storylines, like very big ones, that revolve entirely around her character. Like, you kind of had to do that. So, like, when you say, would there have been a movie? I don't think there would have been a movie about Falcon and Winter Soldier. I think there would have been one about Wanda, for sure. Maybe not the WandaVision storyline, which is cute, but still, like, they were pretty popular. And then, like, I think things like not like Ms. Marvel are a lot better at bringing not background characters from the movie in, but bringing like less well-known or less directly popular characters in. And I think that's a good thing to expand the universe. But bringing in characters that already existed that weren't, that are still fairly popular but weren't the central point yet isn't necessarily something you can credit the shows with. But all that being said, I do admit that those were the first 3 shows that did that, and the other ones have been following more of a trend of bringing in slightly more B-list characters and expanding the universe a little bit better. So maybe they just weren't ready to fully commit to that at the beginning, which is understandable. You do still want to have A-list star power when you're starting off something new.
Yeah, the second wave of shows has featured lead characters who had never been seen in the movies. And so they're really trying to expand the world more, which they're already trying to do with Phase 4 by introducing more new characters. And I think that's the issue I keep coming back to, is that they're expanding the world so fast that we're detecting a lot of inconsistencies.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem with having a lot of content per se, because you do have things that have a lot of content that still manage to be coherent if they are, managed properly and run by, a central power, which they are in this case. Like, I'm going to give a weird example. The sheer volume of novelization, video games, and side things that are around the Warhammer 40k universe. They still have a coherent universe because, everything is owned by one company. But in this case, everything is owned by one company, and it could still, the speed at which it's happening and the amount of people that it's touching is definitely greater. But the feat of having many media in the same universe isn't something necessarily new. I mean, a lot of the Star Wars Extended Universe before Disney got its hand onto it had managed that and had people dedicated to it. So yes, they went too fast, but I think they also just went without a plan in a lot of cases. And that's, I think, what is more jarring, is that it feels like it wasn't just fast, it wasn't planned out. And I think that's one of the things, like, I know Mjolnir keeps coming back to when she talks about, the difference between DC and Marvel is that Marvel planned it out, pushed it slowly, got its way in, and DC just tried to force something, and now it's the opposite, where DC is trying to plan things, they're still, not doing great, but Marvel is just pushing everything forward under Disney.
Yeah, I don't know how much of this is Disney kind of like forcing them to create more content for Disney Plus.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to, paint, peg the mouse as the evil villain and everything, but at the same time, there is a
you know, the same thing is happening to Star Wars. Star Wars is also getting tons of things since Disney Plus has been a thing and since, Disney has taken over. So it's hard to not say there's something at work there.
But not nearly the same volume of content. Like, yes, there has been.
Well, they're announcing a lot though. Like
They have, but like I said, Phase 4's screen time is equal to the first 3 phases of the MCU. It's
okay, but how many Star Wars shows is going to take for that runtime to overcome the movies? Not a whole lot. There are a lot less Star Wars movies than there were MCU movies.
fair. One thing that I'm wrestling with here, while I enjoyed the shows like Daredevil that came before, it was kind of annoying, I suppose, that they really didn't have any impact on the movies, or the things that happened in the movies didn't really have an impact on the shows.
Yeah, which also makes it weird that now they are trying to retcon that.
Like, I'll admit, I tried watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the first season, and I was really excited about the idea of ground level people doing stuff in the MCU. And when when the Winter Soldier movie came out and it revealed that S.H.I.E.L.D. was bad, the fact that the show responded to that, and it felt like that was really the one time where the two things were cohesive.
Yeah.
So I was excited about these shows coming to Disney Plus, because I said, great, now we're going to have TV shows that are actually relevant to the movies, and vice versa, that things that happen in the TV shows impact the movies, things that happen in the movies impact the TV shows.
And they're starting.
It's so little at this point. We've had 7 shows, including 7 or 8 shows, including She-Hulk. The only real ties that the movies have had to the series so far is obviously Wanda showing up in the second Doctor Strange movie.
Yep.
And then Yelena coming to Hawkeye after being in the Black Widow movie.
And even that, because of the way the order in which they were released, was not as impactful as it might have been.
And then now with the 3rd episode of She-Hulk, there's a reference to the Shang-Chi movie, because it mentions the fight that Wong and Abomination had.
Oh, yeah. Maybe. Oh, that's in the 3rd episode? Maybe I have seen all 3 then.
It's teased at the end of the 2nd, and then it's more of a focus.
Oh, okay, yeah. But, yeah, but at the same time, and this is why I don't exactly know how to feel about a show like She-Hulk, because it seems to be the first one where they're trying to do that, but like obviously they were setting up some things in WandaVision for Multiverse of Madness, and those ones had been kind of planned together, although, we had our episode on Multiverse of Madness. There were a lot of problems with that production that ended up not working out in its favor. But, we're getting to the point where it might start working, but it hasn't yet. And a lot of, weirdly, a lot of, the shows feel more like a setup than a payoff, if that makes sense.
It's like you're mentioning how, Ms. Marvel is basically just teeing up her appearance in the Marvels.
Kind of, but also that, there was an opportunity to start building the Marvel universe in these TV shows. And, there's a few attempts at it, and I do appreciate them. The Department of Damage Control and, the Security Council, or whatever the thing in, Winter Soldier, Snowy Owl, sorry. But those haven't really impacted anything yet. And I know we're probably getting to there in movies, but it feels like you could have done that through the TV shows too. You didn't have to wait for the movies to show the results of what the TV shows have been doing.
Yeah, I guess the things that I'm really looking for when I look at a show that's set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is what the lived experience of just normal people in that world is like. that was one thing I enjoyed about Spider-Man Homecoming when that movie came out, because it showed you what the high school life of normal teenagers is in that world.
Yeah.
Moon Knight felt totally like there were like no connections. Like, even I felt like there were no name drops to people or
Yeah,
things
Moon
that,
Knight was very standalone-ish, which I understand, but yeah, it did seem a little weird.
like, maybe because I'm like, that's why I like the MCU, because everything's connected, even if it's in minor ways. And maybe it's just an impossible task now to perfectly explain where everybody is and why no one else
Ah,
gets involved in the events of, you know, things happening in a show or a film.
I mean, impossible's a bit much. Like, because again, there is a precedent for things being explained and working in a more or less coherent way. We're just not getting that right now anymore, right? And I think that's the big problem, again, is that we're not getting kind of what was promised.
One thing I've heard people say, because these are TV shows instead of movies, is that they're more character driven, that more time is spent getting to know characters and seeing them in their everyday settings, like learning that Bucky Barnes he's right-handed, so it's not as natural for him to use the metal arm for stuff because it's not his dominant hand.
Yeah, like, I understand that, but I also, again, kind of, but they could have done it better or more, you know? You definitely could have, like you said, had more character moments, had more what's happening in this universe. And then the other thing is that character driven can mean different things, right? Like, character driven should mean that the character's goals are what drives the story, right? And that's not really what we've seen in the MCU per se, right? Like,
Well, the character's goals or like the journey that they're on.
yeah, I suppose that, but that's the thing. The journeys that are on are a different thing, in my opinion, to the actual, yeah, to what we should be getting. If that makes any sense.
Sure. So like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or Snow White Owl as we call it,
Yep.
arguably that show is about Sam Wilson accepting the fact that he is worthy of being Captain America.
Yeah, kind. But it's also a lot. But it is also a lot about the world building around the void that Cap left, and about, Zola being there to do things for reasons, and like I understand that was kind of the purpose of it, but and again, in the execution, I don't feel like we always get that. Like, I think WandaVision definitely was character driven, right? Even though they kind of, shoehorned in a little bit of like, this is what the universe is doing, but I don't know that Loki Loki kind of was, but also did a lot of weird characterization of Loki that I am well aware a lot of fans did not enjoy at all. So,
Well, and that's the other thing too. We have to remember that Loki isn't the exact same Loki that lived through the events of all the movies that had come out.
yeah, which is another thing. Yeah, you have to consider that's the Loki from the end of. Yeah, it's a Loki that never sacrificed himself, and yet they kind of play him as if he was the same Loki.
Well, they try to get around that by having him watch like all the footage of what happened to him. So it's like, oh, I've instantly learned all the things that the other Loki knew.
Yeah, but also, why would he also decide that was important to him? He is a totally.
His parents die was like meaningful to him still.
Oh yeah, that's true. That part of it. But again, those aren't necessarily the things that are shown in the MCU to have been what impacted him.
Right. I will say Ms. Marvel, I think, does the whole building up the world of the MCU well. Of all the shows, I think that and Hawkeye, I think probably the ones that the world building I enjoyed the most, probably because it was the least cosmic and I know anyway, cosmic's not the right word, least science fictiony, and it kind of just shows you like what living in that world is like, and for someone like Clint Barton to be recognized in the street sort of thing.
Yeah. And like, I'm not saying that the MCU fails as a whole to deliver what it promised, but there are definitely not as many concrete examples of what I was hoping for happening in the show.
Now maybe the multiverse is the way forward because we have the animated stuff. What If came out, cracked open the multiverse, and started just showing us different worlds as a series.
Yeah.
They've now announced spinning out of that is a Marvel zombie show that'll be animated, and then another season of What If.
Yeah, I still don't know. Like, I think it's helping, but again, like I've talked about it several times, my gripes with the understanding the multiverse, like I think it's another case of trying to have your cake and eat it too. Like, you're trying to have a bunch of different stories that don't affect each other, but you're also trying to keep people interested in a coherent vision. You can't do both at the same time.
Well, I mean, that's what comic books do.
Yeah, but that's why the multiverse in comic books is just like, oh yeah, these ones are in another universe. Like, it's kind of a very it was. I mean, they changed it around a little bit, but at some point it was a very dismissive kind of, this is here and that's there, right?
You would prefer the What If show if the characters from the different universes never met each other.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And if you wanted to have different shows be in different universe canonically, you can retcon that if you really want to, and say that, but then don't also try to throw them in. And I mean, that is why people were so upset with the 616 being the universe of the TV show, is because it's not. 616 is the main comic continuity. Like, these are not exactly the same heroes as we're getting in the comics. Like, you shouldn't pretend that they are, because they really aren't. And if you've already gotten the universe, like, I don't know, I feel like that was such a great opportunity to create a new number that would become iconic for Marvel, but they didn't. Kind of like how you got the different Earths in DC, and you're like, well, this one is the Golden Age comic Earth, and this one is the Silver Age comic Earth, and like, they are different places. I know it's a cobbled together explanation, but they've stuck to it and they've taken the time to actually respect it. Whereas it seems that the MCU is trying to use that as an excuse to do whatever, but then not respecting it within the properties that already exist.
Well, have you heard about Spider-Man Freshman Year?
No.
So this is an animated show that's being made for Disney Plus. Originally, it sounded like it was going to be like a prequel show about like Tom Holland's Spider-Man in his first year of high school, like right after getting his powers. But it's been now confirmed that it is basically going to be set in a different Earth. And the big turning point for this version of Peter Parker is that instead of Tony Stark being in his apartment that day talking to his Aunt May, it's actually Norman Osborn.
Okay.
And so
not that big of a twist.
Well, it puts them on a totally different trajectory, because instead of getting roped
up in things, but it's going to be like voiced by Tom Holland. It's going to be in other ways than that the same universe.
It's not confirmed if he's going to be voiced by Tom Holland. It's probably going to be the same guy they had to do him in What If.
Right.
Weird technicality, like how much they can use Tom Holland for stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Sony thing, but yeah, it sounds like, because Marvel still has the rights to every TV thing for Spider-Man, they just don't have movie things. But yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a full-on Spider-Man show, and then it's a version of the MCU where just things are different. So it's like it can exist in its own world and have its own version of characters, but then doesn't have to follow the MCU continuity perfectly. Like Daredevil's going to be in this show, voiced by Charlie Cox. Doctor Strange is going to be in this show, but because it's a different universe, it works because, you know, in the main MCU timeline, Peter Parker doesn't meet Matt Murdock until No Way Home.
Yeah.
In this
And
show, they can write it's like, oh, they met a lot earlier.
Yeah, and you can do things like that, and that's fun, but then you have to establish what your rules are for alternate universes, and because that does sound like a different universe, but by the explanations that were given in the MCU, it sounds a lot more like a divergent timeline, like a variant, than an actual. You know what I mean?
Isn't that just basically like, I don't see the difference between like a variant universe and multiverse.
The fact that they could shut it completely down because Kang was keeping it all completely at bay at that point, and yet there were also other things that happened. You know, there was the mention of thousands of universes in the Doctor Strange movie. There's a difference between the way that What If does it and alternate timelines. Like, again, like, I understand what you mean. Like, it isn't a big difference, but again, if you want to have people really buy into what you're selling, then you got to sell the same product.
I'll be honest, I guess I'm not intelligent enough to know the differences, so to me it doesn't seem as incoherent.
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily entirely a coherence thing, but it's just it feels sloppy.
Okay. All right, well, here's what's coming up on Disney Plus. You can tell me if any of these shows are of interest to you. There is going to be a second season of Loki. Does that get a bat cookie or a bat noogie from you?
Oh, we're doing that. It gets a bat cookie, but mostly out of curiosity and the fact that clearly Tom Hiddleston is having fun with this.
For me, it's a bat noogie because Loki was not super enjoyable for me, so I will not. I does not.
But Owen Wilson.
I do like Owen Wilson, but maybe I'll just look up clips on YouTube of Owen Wilson.
Okay, that fair enough.
Ironheart. Riri Williams, who is going to be making her debut in the second Black Panther movie. She's like a teenage genius who basically becomes like an Iron Man type.
Yeah. Noogie. But I don't. Here's the thing. Normally I would say a bat noogie, but because of Ms. Marvel, I'll say it's a bat cookie. That could work out.
Yeah, for me it's a Thensation bat cookie. If she comes across really well in the Black Panther movie, maybe it'll turn into a full-on bat cookie.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to put it.
Secret Invasion, starring Emilia Clarke and Samuel L. Jackson and Ben Mendelsohn as his Skrull character. Which is being marketed as like the first crossover show of the Disney Plus shows.
I'm going to say bat noogie, but Marvel has a chance to properly do a comic series. So maybe. Because, like, WandaVision was good, but it wasn't the WandaVision comic series. And it had a lot of other problems related to that, so... I don't know. I'll say Thensation bat cookie, but I'm not giving it a lot of slack.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to do Secret Invasion properly with the way they've set up the Skrulls in this world. So for me, right now it's a bat noogie. Daredevil, Born Again, recently announced at Comic-Con.
Bad cookie, because I did really enjoy the Netflix Daredevil show, and it's the same people, like the same actors at the very least.
Yeah, it's not clear if they're kind of retroactively making everything that happened in the Netflix show canon, or if it's just certain elements, or if it's like Jameson, where it's the same actor, just a different version. Either way, I'm happy Charlie Cox is there. Bat Cookie.
Yeah.
Echo, spinning out of Hawkeye.
Oh yeah, I forgot that was happening. That Noogie. I honestly did not think she was a very interesting character in Hawkeye, and I'm not excited to learn more about her and the obvious betrayal of her boyfriend.
For now, it's a Thin Station Bat Cookie for me. I'd be curious to see what it's like when just to have a lead character who speaks in American Sign Language, see what that's like. And I'm told
Watch Baby Driver.
I'll get to it eventually.
But
But
yeah, I've
also,
been telling you to do that for a while.
both Daredevil and Kingpin are in that show, so I'm interested.
Oh right. That does change mine to a Thin Station Bat Cookie. You're right.
Agatha, Coven of Chaos. The Agatha Harkness show.
Yeah, no, I know what it is. Yeah, Bat Noogie. She was a fun character for half an episode,
Wow.
but she was honestly more fun as the side character than as Agatha, I think.
Yeah, I'm not interested in it. Bat Noogie. Armor Wars, starring Don Cheadle.
Man, I'm gonna say Thin Station Bat Cookie just because John Cheadle. Because, yeah, Don Cheadle's funny and enjoyable, even though that's not his greatest role. He managed to suck me into enjoying parts of Space Jam 2, so he might be able to carry a show too as well.
Armor Wars is a really interesting story from the comics where the blueprints for Iron Man's armor get out there in the world, and a bunch of people are making different armors.
Yeah. No, I know, but it's a famous comic series that they're trying to do in the TV. And to be fair, a TV show I think is a better medium for a lot of the big comic series. So there's a good chance that these will work better, but they still have yet to make a proof of concept.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing for Rhodey's character, because in the MCU Iron Man's dead, so naturally there's like this added level of, I gotta protect Tony's legacy to make sure that this doesn't get out of hand.
Yeah.
Spider-Man freshman year.
Look, I am not the big Spider-Man fan that most other people in the universe are, so I'm gonna say Bat Noogie.
Oh, big old Bat Cookie for me.
That's why I prefaced mine the way I did.
Marvel Zombies.
Oh, Bat Noogie. Could not care less.
Yeah, Bat Noogie. I'm not particularly interested in it. And then finally, we have What If Season 2.
I gotta say Bat Noogie. The only thing that I consider Season 1 gave us that was worth it was basically an apology for Age of Ultron.
Well, how about Chadwick Boseman's final T'Challa performance?
Look, it has cultural significance, but not really entertainment significance.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned.
So looking ahead here, there's not a whole lot that they're doing that is of interest to you.
Yeah, but then again, that's been the last several years of Marvel. And, but that... I'm married to a huge Marvel fan. I will end up still seeing some of them, and some of them have surprised me and I've enjoyed more than I thought. So, I wouldn't have watched Ms. Marvel if I wasn't married to Mjolnir, and I wouldn't have watched She-Hulk either. So, there are things that I'm pleasantly surprised. I probably wouldn't have watched Obi-Wan. Actually, no, I watched Obi-Wan for the podcast, but, there are things that have pleasantly surprised me. It's just the exception rather than the rule.
So let's imagine you're a teacher. Let's imagine this is like a midterm paper. I know you don't grade midterm papers, and you're not a university professor, but
I'm trying to.
let's say,
I was trying to see where that analogy
let's
was
say
going.
you're the professor teaching a course on making television, and this is like Marvel Studios' project is like all the stuff they've made up until now, and they
there a
give
bell
you the
curve?
executive power to decide if they should continue to make TV or not. Are you going to give them a passing grade?
Is there a bell curve? Do I have to compare them to other studios?
In this scenario, no.
Oh, that's not very university-like. Yes. I think they have a passing grade, but it's one of those, like, you pass, but there's, like, I don't know if you ever had profs or teachers, like, give you an okay grade, maybe slightly better than you expected, but then they've got, like, 6 paragraphs of things they would change.
Yep.
I actually, Mjolnir recently got that, for one of her final projects, she got a good grade, but then got, like, almost all what seemed to be negative feedback for it, and I was like, oh, but you liked it, right? That's what I would give the MCU. I would be like, I'm okay with what you're doing, and I'll let you pass, but, like, I've got a lot of issues, and you should start working on those.
Yeah, I suppose on the whole, as an experiment thus far, they have given us a lot of new characters, more diverse characters that probably wouldn't have been greenlit for a movie 4 years ago. My comment, if you're listening, Marvel, going forward, is to really put effort into finding ways for these things to actually tie back into the movies. And, like, while Moon Knight was enjoyable, the fact that it felt so removed from everything, at least that's not why I go to the MCU, is I like the interconnectedness.
Yeah, just be jerk gently, guys. But that was a deep cut reference that nobody got.
Yeah, I didn't get it, but that's okay. So all the shows we've talked about are airing on Disney Plus. Disney Plus Day is this week. They'll probably be announcing more, and this episode will immediately be out of date, which is fine.
If you want to reach the show, you can send us an email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
You can find the Bat Jar Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, because we got a channel. Share our posts on Facebook, write reviews, give our shows a rating. This will help all people join us inside the Bat Jar, and we appreciate it dearly.
It's time to go inside the Bat Jar to find a topic for next week, but I'm unprepared. You can see it in my background. I got to go grab it. Should have grabbed them beforehand. I don't know what I was thinking.
That I would bring up something that we should talk about? I don't know.
Okay. Esports growth and what a professional gamer is.
I don't think I put that in there, did I?
Maybe. I didn't put this in.
I mean, it sounds like something I would, but I don't remember forcing that issue on the podcast.
Well, there we go. We're diving into esports next week and what a professional gamer is, kind of trying to answer that question. So, come back to the Bat Chart podcast next week when we talk about esports and professional gaming. And until that time, I'm Average Joe.
I'm Beef Pork Ribs.
Catch you on the flip side.
And be a strong, independent siren.